Thank you, everyone who hung in here the last session of the day. Thanks for being here. I think we'll have a really interesting conversation about market outlook, sustainable packaging trends in the fresh produce industry. We have a great panel, and we'll take your questions at the end, so stick around if you have questions for these brilliant guys here. But packaging is very important to the produce industry, as all of you in this room know. It's important to preserve quality and freshness of the products. It's important around food safety. It really allows us to bring fresh produce from the farm to the table safely and efficiently. But as in every other industry, we're starting to have increased concerns from consumers about packaging, type of packaging, what happens end of life with packaging, and also evolving regulations, both state, local, federal, and international regulations that are changing that we're having to adapt to. At my organization, I'm Bonnie Estes with the International Fresh Produce Association. I'm the Vice President of Innovation. And we have a program that's going on right now that is funded by the USDA, and we're getting $5 million where we're giving grants to packaging companies and innovators to come up with different kinds of solutions for the packaging industry. So the request for applications for this next year open October 15th, and there's a bunch of cards on that table in the back, in the front, that have a QR code. So if any of you have any innovations, we'd love to give you some money so that you could work on them to solve some of these issues. So looking at the industry, to the panel, we have two great people who have different perspectives of the industry, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves, just say a little bit about yourself and your company, and then we'll jump into the questions. So Wyatt, you can go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Wyatt Macy. I'm the Director of Sustainability for Taylor Fresh Foods, which is Taylor Farms. We're a large fresh produce supplier located out of Salinas, California, operating primarily in North America. We typically deal with specialty produce, but we dabble in prepared foods like chicken parmesan, yogurt parfaits, etc. I'm our Director of Sustainability. I manage and implement our strategy and project implementation nationwide.
What about my mic? Does it work?
Yeah.
Hey.
It's a Wyatt thing.
Yep, it's just against Wyatt. Hi, everybody. I'm Nate Klingler. I am the Director of Strategic Marketing at a company called IFPA. A lot of us know us for the black plastic boxes that are used across a lot of the fresh supply chain, mainly in fresh produce here in North America, but we are a global organization with, I think, the most pooled assets in circulation. So hundreds of millions of these little black boxes floating around the world, used for all kinds of fresh goods. Prior to coming to IFCO, I was mainly on the fresh food side. So I worked a lot of years in the marketing and sales world, in the world of fresh produce and fresh meat. So the world of sales and marketing is what I do all day, every day for many, many years now.
Great, thanks both of you. So let's set the stage a little bit. So to both of you, and Nate, we can start with you. What are the biggest sustainability drivers you're seeing right now in fresh produce packaging? And who are they coming from? Is it consumers or retailers or regulators or your boss, or where is it coming from?
Mainly the boss. So for us, we see a lot of it driven by the retailers. So the retailers long ago set these goals that are coming up very quickly. It's like this 2030 plan, which at the time was a far, far away, right? And so everybody set these really aggressive goals. But then as things creep closer and closer, they were like, well, how can we actually meet these goals? And a really great way of meeting the goals is using reusable packaging. It's a way to make a big dent very quickly. But then I would say a close second, and in some cases, the growers do outpace the retailers, because these are people that farm the land, that care about the land, that care about the environment, that have a vested interest in the planet doing well. And so I feel like currently it's retailers, and then secondly growers, but there are times where the growers are outpacing them. And then third, it's kind of like this three-legged stool of you have the consumers that are very sustainable savvy. They want transparency in packaging, they hate waste, and they share that with the retailers and the grocers that they shop at, and then it's kind of this waterfall effect that affects everybody involved. So IFCO sees this, it's a unique perspective of seeing it kind of from all angles, and we have that unique position of being able to help all involved. So I kind of see it as this three-legged stool of interchangeable interested parties driving sustainability from different perspectives.
Wyatt, how about you? You are in a different part of the supply chain, but you span a huge part of the supply chain as well. And what are you seeing?
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments. I would say 2 years ago, it's definitely the retailers, the Walmarts, Costco's, Targets of the world, Albertsons. They really started the mandates of recyclability, recycled content, et cetera. And then they said it came from consumers, but I would pressure that a little bit because we're not seeing it translate necessarily into sales yet. So I think that's interesting. But you see that consumer pressure. Yeah. But really, I think the bigger driver was their public goals that was going to hold them accountable. Now, 2 years in, I would say it shifted more towards regulation, obviously. EPR has been a huge conversation topic in both sessions. Obviously, that's driving. I'm curious to see where I think conceptually it's supposed to change infrastructure and material selection, et cetera. The way the fee basis is set up, I would be interested to see how that works out. I'll talk to it a little bit later, but I think that's a driver. And then you're seeing a lot of other potential bans like PFAS bans, recycled content mandates by state. What's making it so hard is there's no standardization or uniformity across the retailer base nor the regulatory base. EPR conceptually is the same across states, but the way they're enacting it, eco-modulation, et cetera, is a little different. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting. I would like to see standardization, but I don't know if we're going to get it yet.
So Wyatt, sticking with you, how is Taylor Fresh approaching source reduction in packaging? And can you share examples of how you're balancing protection and shelf life with your sustainability goals?
Yeah, I think from a optimization standpoint, reduction, there's not a ton of opportunity. I think our teams are constantly on with that in mindset, just because we operate on super low margins, packaging's expensive, 10, 15, 20% of product costs. So I think that's front and center in terms of optimization. I think where we're really getting driven by the retailer in both regulatory is material selection. So we're looking heavily into fiber materials, for instance. We heavily relied on plastics, but reason being is that our packaging is functional. So if you know what MAP is, modified atmosphere packaging, that's prolific within our space of value added because we're ready to eat, ready to consume by the consumer. So our shelf life is 16 days to 4 days. So that modified atmosphere is extremely important, and plastic plays a really significant role in that. In fiber, we're not seeing that modified atmosphere capabilities yet. So I think for us, it's more material selection. What materials are coming to market? What are improving recyclability or improving our compostable, et cetera. I'd say that's where we're really starting to embark on this very big journey, and it'll change a lot of things in our industry.
So Nate, IFPA has been a leader in reusable packaging systems. What advantages and challenges do you see for reusable and produce supply chains?
So advantages, when it comes to reusables, there's like this low-hanging fruit that everybody likes to point out, which is the environmental savings, the sustainability aspect, right? It's the cool thing of you're able to reduce your CO2, reduce your water use, energy use, all of those fun talking points, waste. But I have yet to see that, at least in North America, be the convincing message to get people on board. For me to go to Wyatt's going to get it, but Wyatt's boss or the CFO is going to say, no, thank you, right? So there has to be other benefits. So for us, we go beyond that. We have to go beyond that. And so we see operational efficiencies. When you bring in the RPCs, there's just a lot of things that you're able to get. It ties in well with automation systems. It's a durable thing, so it's easier to build out the pallet. The pallet survives better during transport, and then there's a lot of things that keep it in the world of fresh produce, but on the retailer side, they see a lot of benefits as well. And then beyond that, you get some cost transparency. So because these crates last for so long, you're more stable in your pricing. So rather than these growers going out annually, every 6 months, whatever it may be, and renegotiating their box costs, they're able to work with people like IFPA, and we can give them a pretty consistent price year over year, and it's something they can plan on and account for, and that usually makes CFOs very happy. So I see those as the sustainability is the one that everybody likes to point at, but there's a lot of other things that are the convincing message that's getting other people on board in using RPCs and reusable packaging in a bigger way. And then what was the challenges?
Yeah.
Okay, so challenges at this point, I feel like is mainly about educating people about what these things can do. At least in North America, they're still relatively new. In other parts of the world, Europe, they've been using these things and it's kind of the industry standard. So I feel like the main thing that we get to is just how do you properly use these things so that they don't get stuck in a field? Because if they're not moving, it doesn't benefit us, it doesn't benefit the retailer, it doesn't benefit the grower. These are a pooled asset, so think of it like a rental car. If I rent a car and then don't bring it back to the airport, there's not a car for Wyatt to get the next time he goes there. So it's kind of the same thing. It's just this education process and making people understand what a circular economy is and how it functions, and how if you don't play your part, then we can't play our part and nobody's happy. So I feel like that's the biggest challenge that we have.
So what's the sales cycle and how has it changed? Is it easier? I mean, that's a lot to say to a customer on an entry phone call, you know? So yeah. If you're compared to like 2 years ago where people starting to say, oh, this makes more sense, I kind of understand the whole point of it. Is it getting easier to sell these types of products or?
So it is kind of a mix. So we usually start with the retailer because for us, we need to complete the cycle and they play a very key role. So we usually start with the retailer because we want to make sure that if a company like Taylor Farms sends it into their supply chain, that we can get it back. So we go in and we educate their team, talk through how the use of RPCs works in their stores and their distribution centers, walk them through the cycle of how these things work, which is essentially we send our RPCs to the grower packs it, they send it to the retail distribution center, it's used in the store, collapsed, sent back to the retail distribution center. IFPA picks it up, sends it through the wash line, collapses it, sends it back out to Taylor Farms, and it happens over and over again hundreds of times. And so we explain that whole process to the retailer, get them on board. As soon as they're on board and we know we can get them back, then we start working with their vendors to convert from a single use to usually a corrugate box into one of our crates, and we walk them through that whole process.
Great. So to both of you, beyond reusables, what recent innovations excite you the most, whether it's in types of materials or design or other circular solutions? Wyatt, you want to start?
Yeah, I talked a little bit about it previously, but I think definitely where material resin selection is headed, you're seeing a lot of older materials that maybe weren't as prevalent kind of come back into the picture. So I've been hearing a lot of like chitosan, for instance, recently, which is like shell-based. A lot of fiber-based polymers or bio-based polymers as well. So I think that's really interesting. I think it has a long way to go in terms of functionality in meeting where plastic is today. But I think that's something that's really interesting, is going to change the space, because looking out here, the slightest material change changes your line, or it can change your line. So I think this industry is going to have to maybe adapt a lot as well, depending on where material selection goes. So I think it's more has a bigger waterfall effect than I think we initially anticipate. I also think software. So in my space, I do have somewhat of a jurisdiction over packaging, more from a design selection and material selection standpoint. So I think software is going to play a really interesting play here, specifically where EPR is headed, and a lot of regulation in what's called LCA, so life cycle impact or assessment. I think you're seeing some tools pop out that have somewhat LCA modeling capabilities. They're very high level. You call it a conceptual LCA, so it's very, very baseline, and it gives you a direction. It should not be used for factual decision making, but it gives you a direction of where a certain material could play. So when you're factoring in reusables, how does that impact from an LCA perspective than just a one-off reuse IPC container versus a current tote? So I think, and one, just software, but also how LCAs are modeled. So today, they're not very good at taking in end-of-life or reusable circumstances or refillable circumstances. So I think that's kind of where I'm interested to see where software takes us. We use a tool called SpecWrite that houses all of our specs, and we're trying to partner with that with an LCA modeling tool to do very quick, instantaneous LCA modeling across our entire portfolio, as well as specific SKUs. And I think that's going to really come into play with EPR and what's called eco-modulation and those incentives and malices that you could get. And whereas Oregon's taking an LCA approach, Colorado's taking more of like a PCR recyclability approach. And so you're going to kind of need a different software for that too. So I think software is going to play an integral role, obviously, in compliance, but also how do you assess hundreds of different materials coming at you from various different startups, whether it be algae-based, fiber-based, et cetera? How are you going to evaluate those on a standard basis, but quickly? Without running through your line every single time, that can kind of give you a head start. So I'm intrigued where software might take us, and then the amount of materials coming up, how are we going to use software to partner with that material selection process that will then change a lot of how our lines may look and operate in the future.
So one quick question follow up on that is, Taylor Farms grows many different things, packages many different things, is a very large company and obviously a leader in the industry. What happens with smaller companies and smaller grower shippers that maybe they pack two products, or they don't manufacture any of the materials that they use for packaging? What happens with those companies now?
Yeah, that's rough. I think we need like the larger players, the Taylor Farms, the Doles, the Fresh Expresses, to be the scale tipper. That price right now is too much at a premium delta for those companies to absorb. And so I think we have a responsibility to try to tip that to scale, economies of scale, to get that price point down to then be widely adopted across the industry, as well as proof of concept. So again, those smaller companies can't just absorb it; they also can't test it or throughput that many materials in that time frame. So I think we're kind of that front leader, pilot guinea pig to really test those materials, vet those materials, and then put those at economies of scale to really get down to the price point that's adoptable for the rest of the industry.
Right. So back to you on things that are exciting,
Innovation.
maybe within your company, or things you've seen outside that.
So there's a few things that I think are really cool happening right now. One of them is the amount of data that everybody is collecting and sharing with each other. That's new to the supply chain, and especially in the world of fresh produce. A lot of
Not
these
on a
things.
spreadsheet anymore.
Yeah. A lot of businesses. I mean, there were order systems. I think there still are that run on the DOS system, right? And so it was a long time coming in the world of fresh produce. So the fact that we now have these massive data sets being collected and shared across vendors and suppliers and retailers and people like us. In some cases, we're now on the other side where it's almost death by data, and we have so much that we have to figure out how to make it actionable. And so I don't want to use the word of artificial intelligence or AI, but AI is useful when you have a situation like that. But then making that data actionable and doing something with it. So that's one. Two, I'll say it's separate from reusables, but kind of ancillary to it. And that's all of the things that we've seen that are very much a trend at this show, I feel like, is when you use a reusable packaging, it's something that's used over and over again, and it doesn't hit a recycling bin or a garbage bin. You can attach really cool things to it and collect even more data that in the past has been a separate service or a separate module. So for us, imagine if you can use your RPC, your IFPA RPC, right? And rather than having a temp tell or something like that, that's a separate service and a separate pool that you have to manage, it's integrated into the package itself. And because it's a reusable thing used over 100 times, you can do that, and it makes sense to do it. You're not attaching it to a baler bag or a cardboard box that you then have to try and collect before it's thrown away or sent through the recycling loop. And so those are the things.
That's so cool. And then it can integrate with all the other data and the stuff that you're doing.
Exactly.
Too.
Exactly.
So is that happening now, or going?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like this is the thing that everybody's kind of working towards, because with the battery technologies and the different sensor technologies, and then also the software is why, like, I feel like we're finally getting there, and to a point where we've been talking about it for years now, and I feel like the world is finally caught up to where it's feasible and possible.
So everybody's favorite topic, policy and regulations, which is definitely a topic of the day. So the extended producer responsibility and other policy measures are reshaping, to say the least, packaging decisions. How are these influencing strategy and investment today? You want to start?
You want me to go? So for us, where we are a reusable company, we do embrace the circular economy principles. And so hypothetically, in a perfect world, a reusable asset should never hit a waste stream. And so for us, our main strategy is getting with the different regulatory bodies and making sure that they're including reusable assets into the way that they're writing the guidelines, so that when these things are enacted in the coming years, when it comes time for Wyatt and his team to fill out the paperwork and report on these things, they don't have to worry about their IFCO pool, because their IFCO pool, by the nature of its business model, is exempt from these things because we're not impacting the waste stream. And so as long as they're used correctly, we're written out of the regulations, and it really helps make their lives easier. So that's one. And then secondarily, I would say it's forcing retailers and fresh produce growers to really look at the total cost of ownership of their packaging that they use. So there's a term that we use a lot of in the reusable world, where it's kind of like you spend 5 cents to save 20. And in the past, that was a really difficult concept to wrap your head around, whereas now, when you're looking at all of these EPR regulations coming through and the government's passing on the cost of disposing of this waste or managing this waste and sharing that with others that helped create it, there's a cost there. And they're sharing that cost with the people that are creating it. And so that's a really big benefit in the world of reusables, because we're not adding to that cost. And so then it drives the cost of managing a reusable pool dramatically down. So that's how we see it.
Yeah, appreciate that. From a Taylor Farms perspective, again, I have two hats. I feel like one side that understands the concept and the intent of EPR and where that law was kind of born. I think we're so behind on infrastructure that proved the necessity for it, if you will. However, execution, being my Taylor Farms hat, there's a lot there that hopefully changes. I think from a strategy standpoint, understanding we're so heavily married to plastics right now due to functionality requirements and other food safety needs, et cetera, that we're going to have a bill. We're going to have those fees. I don't know if necessarily be interesting if refill reuse ever makes it into our space. I think there's a lot of challenges there. But I think we've accepted our fate that we're going to have this bill. So then it becomes, how do we maximize those eco-modulation incentives and reduce those malices? And while exploring different material alternatives, but also understanding that I think those materials probably have a long way to go as well. So we're going to be in plastics for quite a while. Again, that's where software, I think, really plays a role for us. So we've heavily invested in upfront in both inventory software, such as SpecRite, that helps us manage all of our specs, to then transition that into a tool for like an LCA modeling tool. We use a tool called Track. And there's other tools that are coming out of the woodworks as well. But we're trying to partner with that so that we could, again, do an LCA quickly, show Oregon that. But then we're also looking tools. I just went by APR's booth, so plug for them. I think they're building more of this online kind of tool that will bring their design tool to automation, so that it really shows you, once you upload your specs, it'll immediately tell you where are you hitting recyclability goals and incentives versus where will you probably be hit with malices. So I think I'm going to look at that heavily, because in partnership with the Triac, I think we're in a really good position to try and maximize our incentives and reduce our malices from an eco-modulation standpoint. I will say for EPR, I'll also do a plug here, that I think we need to be more vocal. I think things like weren't intended. So for instance, I'll give you an example of a fiber versus a PET rigid tray. We're exploring a fiber tray, for instance. Well, that fiber tray is 3.5 times the weight of a PET rigid, just because it's fiber. The fee structure tried to do that incentive for transition to say fiber versus plastic, but the delta wasn't removed because the weight takes up that delta for that savings. So essentially our fiber tray is equal to that of a PET rigid from a fee perspective, from a weight perspective, so a ratio perspective. So there wasn't much incentive there to drive where our fiber delta is on that premium today. It didn't cut much off. So we're still at this challenge of marketing and getting retailers to maybe try and test this new fiber tray that seems to be prove out more either recyclable or compostable, et cetera. So it's things like that that I think need to be looked at, and the industry, all industries need to have more vocal conversation with CAA and the pros to understand where those fee structures aren't working out. And then also an example of eco-modulation for Oregon, for instance, in LCA. They've put an eco-modulation incentive for LCA. Those who have done an LCA know it's extremely expensive. That discount or that incentive does not account for the LCA cost. So most of the time when we were quoting out what it would have done or what it would have been to do an LCA on a batch of our packaging, it wiped out the incentive plus some. So it was actually going to come at a cost. And so we're having conversations with Oregon, with DEQ, with other states to try and say, hey, we understand where the incentive is trying to go, but it's not exactly lining up to reality. And so how do we massage this a little bit more to try and really make the incentives work for those transitions? So I would say, again, good intent, good concept, but execution, I would like to see a little bit more. And I think it's going to take more narrative across industries, though. I know produce was a little behind the ball on EPR, and other industries were a little bit further, but I'd like to see more conversation on that.
I want to add to that. I think you brought up an interesting point. So the primary packaging that's used a lot in the CPG world is really difficult to replace, right? Because you are so dependent on some of these MAP technologies that have been taken so long to develop. So it's really difficult to now pivot and use something else. So that's putting a lot of added pressure on the secondary and tertiary packaging and looking for alternatives that can help offset the impact of the primary packaging. So I think you're going to see people caught off guard by the plastic wrap around pallets, the corner boards, the slip sheets, those types of things. It's going to catch people off guard. And I was having an interesting conversation with one of the sustainability executives at a big retailer, and he was surprised at how many of their fresh produce vendors are not even talking about EPR, and they're just afraid that this is going to catch so many businesses off guard because they know it's kind of here. They've maybe seen a webinar here and there. They've seen something from the IFPA that this is something, but they're not really wrapping their head around what it means for them as a business or them as an organization. And so there are these retailers that are getting a little bit concerned that it's going to catch a lot of their vendors off guard.
So switching to technology and operations, Nate, how is technology, automation, digital tracking, or material science helping to improve both sustainability and operational performance in packaging?
So for us, we get really excited about technology because it's something where we can give a lot of benefits to. So automation is one. If you walk around this Pack Expo here, you'll see all the different automated pieces of equipment. And I was having an interesting conversation when we were talking with one of our grower partners who was looking at exploring putting different equipment in their facilities and then all of the automation that we use in our own facilities for the wash lines. And this automation engineer said an interesting thing that's just stuck with me. And he just said, when you design these systems for them to reach max efficiency, they need something that is consistent and durable. They like consistency. And so for us, again, at IFPA, where we have a consistent size and really the thing that changes the height of the wall, and that's something that automated systems really like. And so we love seeing the growth of automation in different distribution centers and pack houses and all across the different nodes of the supply chain. And we feel like reusables play in very well to that because, again, they're reused time and time and time again. And they're durable because they're made out of a high quality material, and they can stand up to the rigors of an automated process. And then when it comes to tracking, it's kind of what I brought up before, right? The different digital innovations, the tracking, the temperature, all of that stuff. You can attach that to a reusable box and it makes sense. Whereas with a single-use packaging, it doesn't really make sense. And so it makes it, in my mind, it makes it real. It makes it possible.
So to you, Wyatt, from the grower shipper perspective, what role does technology play in making packaging both sustainable and cost effective?
I think depending on where you sit on finished good packaging, or I call it inbound, outbound, inbound being our IFPA partnership, et cetera, I think it changes the narrative a little bit. But I will say, I think I brought up LCA earlier for a good reason. Any material that you pick up that's tangible in front of you, whatever, a lot of that material, it's not the material itself that's the impact. It's the extraction, the manufacturing, et cetera. So from a life cycle impact, the majority of a material's impact is pre the material. It's the manufacturing process, the extraction, et cetera. So I think that's where technology can be really interesting and something we should think about more. It's not necessarily the fiber itself, the polymer itself. It's how was it made, how was it extracted, where did it come from, et cetera. So it's more about sourcing and manufacturing processes. So it's exciting to be at an industry conference like this, where that is kind of the throughput of material. This is more finished goods, I understand that, but I think that's something we need to explore more. Like, what is the full LCA impact or the full life cycle of a material, taking that into consideration rather than the material itself? And so I think that's where technology has a big opportunity, is lowering the life cycle impact of a material, not necessarily the material. I put a lot of discussion on the material itself because that's important to us from an end-of-life perspective, but a lot of the technology, I think that's where it's going to play the majority of the role. And I think it's extremely important, and it needs more conversation, to be honest.
Okay, I have
Can I add to that
Yeah.
LCA thing? So the fact that you're talking about LCAs makes my heart happy because, again, it's another thing that's kind of new in the world of produce. But like for us, we released our first LCA 10 years ago. And so it's really cool to see that, because you brought up in the EPR stuff, there's kind of this lack of standardization. And I feel like with the industry embracing the LCA methodology, it's a way for us to all standardize around a certain language and a certain standard of this means something. It's a well thought out method. It's something that's peer reviewed, done by independent agencies. It's not something that Wyatt sits in a room with his team and comes up with, right? It's a real calculation. And so I love that you're talking about it. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I don't hear people talking about it that much. You're the only one I hear talk about it. And you talk about it a lot. But it's
Push
great.
that.
Yeah, no, it's important, super important. Okay, 2 ending lightning round questions. First, for both of you, if we fast forward to 2030, what do you expect packaging in the fresh produce aisle to look like? What's our vision to success?
I'll start. Get used to maybe not being able to see the produce. A lot of, like I said, materials that we're looking at, the ability to get transparent or opaque is extremely limited. So I think we're going to have this interesting moment of, will the consumer accept that? Will they accept not being able to see their produce or whatever they're buying? Specifically in food, we know that plays an extremely important part of it. So I also think it's interesting, though, because then it really gives produce brands more of a push to build that relationship with the consumer. So I always use Driscoll's, for instance, really good at building that quality relationship with their customer. If Driscoll's Berries were to put their berries in carton, I think their customers are much more confident in the quality and willingness not to be able to see that necessarily right up front. So I think it's interesting that it might push produce companies that we've never really been good at marketing to build more of that brand and customer relationship, and for the customer to start getting comfortable with, again, not being able to see their produce and understanding, like, be confident in the quality and consistency. And I know that's hard, but I think if we're looking for this packaging transition, that's where I'm seeing it go right now, is the inability to see your produce, it'll be interesting to see if sales will prove that.
For me, I look forward, let's say, in the next 5 years. I hope we move past the mindset of a throwaway economy. We have the technology to reduce waste. We have the technology to boost the quality in the produce on our shelves. We have the technology to build out a cleaner, more circular, more reusable, more innovative supply chain. And I hope that in the next 5 years that we get rid of this throwaway mindset and we move towards packaging is no longer a problem, right? Like, packaging is just not an issue anymore. We've figured it out, and now it's looked at as a solution and something to enable basically the supply chain of the future. And so I'm hoping 5 years from now that we can use all of this new technologies that we've developed to get to that point.
I like that. Last question. What one action would you encourage companies here at this show to take now to prepare for the future of sustainable packaging for produce?
You want me to start? I would put it very simply of get on board. This is moving very quickly. A lot of these things that we've talked about today are not trends. They are happening today. And there are still some companies that are hoping that we'll go back to the supply chain of the past, and I don't think we're going there. We're going to continue moving forward. So this is past the point of being a trend, and I think this has real staying power. And so I would say get on board, and if you are on board and helping push these things forward, then you will help shape what the supply chain of the future looks like, and you'll play an active role in it, and I think it'll be better for you.
I'm a repeating wheel, but I would say systems thinking. So again, this idea of LCA, keeping it in a circular system, no matter what it is either. I mean, if you're a fiber-based plastic provider, a reusable provider, what are your repair systems? What are your take-back systems? If you're fiber-based, what's end-of-life strategy? What are you doing to maximize functionality, et cetera? I think thinking in these systems, don't think linear, really think through all throughout the entire stage. One thing I'm posing to my packaging design team is, what are our end-of-life questions? Basically, I haven't given them a directive of, hey, this is what plastic to choose, what fiber to choose. It's more, these are the questions to be asking. Has the company thought through where they're sourcing their feedstock? Where are they manufacturing it? How is it getting to us? What is happening at end of life? If we have excess on site from, say, faulty issues, can they take it back for us? Can we incorporate it into new? So a lot more systems questions, and again, not this linear thinking of waste, and not thinking about, hey, it's not our problem. We're just a seller. We just sell them product. But hey, we've thought through this entire system. This is how we manufacture it. This is how we get it to you. This is what's supposed to be done with that end of life. We've already got it pre-approved through APR or BPI certification for compostability. You've done all the testing for us so that we don't have to grade it ourselves or assess it ourselves. You've taken a product ready for market, ready for circularity, ready for repair, et cetera. So a systems mindset is really, I think, it's going beyond just shoving product down a customer's throat. Like, how do you provide the full end-to-end solution? I think really pays out dividends in the end too, in terms of saving and whatnot. Systems thinking.
Great. Thank you. Questions? Do we have time for some questions? Yeah. We have a mic. Any questions? I should ask these guys the tough questions.
Thank you for all your sharing, guys. Talking about the RPC, what's the life cycle time frame that you guys have measured or tracking? How long lasts on use?
So we have seen, we play this game every time we go out to our manufacturer, and because we have the recycling process in-house, and we try to find the oldest RPC. I have seen RPCs as old as 15 years old. But we usually calculate for around 100 to 120 times. But in our LCA, we do much less because we want to take it more of the conservative and make it as real as possible. So basically worst case scenario. And we take that, I think in our LCA, it's around 50 times. So it's basically half. But realistically, we are a long time. So like the presentation that was before this was around the technology and the battery life of the system. He was talking 7 to 10 years, something like that. That's basically what these technologies are looking at, because they need to last as long as the asset itself.